Hello everybody and welcome to video 16 in this Django and React tutorial series. In this video, we're actually going to be building out what the entire point of this application was, and this is the voting system. So right now we have this skip button. Clearly it's not working, so obviously we're going to make it so we can indeed skip the current song. And then what we're going to do is make it so that it requires a certain number of skips. Now this is going to require some modification to our application. We're going to need to store who has already voted. We're going to need to check how many votes there are for a room. We're going to have to check if the person voted for an earlier song or if they're voting for the current song. You can imagine there's some complexities that we will have to deal with. But anyways, this is pretty cool. And to just give you an idea of exactly what we're going to do, we're going to make this skip button say like 0 out of 2 or 0 out of 5 or 0 out of however many skips there are required for this room, right? So if, we had changed this to 3, then ideally this would say 0 out of 3 or 1 out of 3 if one person had voted for the current song. Then as soon as the song changes, we'll clear all of the votes because you have to vote for each song, and then we'll just continue from there. Awesome. So hopefully you guys are excited for this. Let's get started. So the first thing that I actually want to do here is I just want to build out a little bit of an infrastructure for actually skipping this song. Now, that's probably just a complicated way to say we're going to learn how to skip the song now. So let's actually create a new view. I'm going to go into my views.py file. And just like we have current song and pause song and play song and all of that, we're going to build a view that is called vote or skip or whatever you want to call it. So actually, let's just call this skip song for now. This will inherit from API view. And we're going to make the default method here post. So the reason we're making it post is because we're kind of updating something in the database, like we're adding a new vote. So it makes sense to post that information. So we're going to say self, we're going to say request, and then we're going to say format equals none. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the room code. The reason we need this again is so that we can access the host access token and then use that token to actually send the request to Spotify. So room code is equal to self.request.session.get, and we're going to get the room_code key. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually get the room. So we're going to say room is equal to room.objects.filter, code being equal to room code. Now, after this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check for our initial kind of testing here. We'll add some more stuff to this later. If the current user, or I guess the current session ID, is equal to the host. If it is, that means that this person should be able to just automatically skip the song. We don't need to look at the votes in that instance because the host can always just skip the song. So we're going to say if self.request.session.session_key equals room.host like that. Then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and skip the song. So we'll say skip_song, and then we'll pass the room.host as the session ID or session key, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to write out this function in just a second. We'll put it in the util file just like the other ones. In the other situation, we will actually do something, but we just won't put that in right here. And then lastly, we are going to return a response. This will be an empty response. And like usual, what we'll say is status .http_204_no content. Now, this should just work. A user will only ever be able to vote for a room that they are currently in. And sorry, this just reminds me, we do need to index 0 right here on room.objects.filter. Now, some of you may be wondering that if this code is always going to work, if it might potentially run into some errors. So there is some situations that we haven't necessarily handled here. It's not going to break our application. That's why I'm not handling them. But typically, if you're writing, like a big, large application, you want to make sure everything was really robust, you would want to check to make sure this room exists before you index at 0, right? Because that's going to leave an error. You also would want to make sure that the user actually does have a current session because they could theoretically send a request to this without having a session created for them yet. Now, for our application to function, if someone is in a room, that's the only place they'll be able to actually vote for the song. So this makes sense, but I'm just trying to clarify here that I'm not covering every single edge case, and you may want to do that. Anyways, let's write out this skip song function here. So let's go into util.py. Got to find that file, and then we'll just start by defining that function. So let's say define skip _song like that. We're going to take the session ID. And we're going to return the execute Spotify API request with the session_ID, an endpoint that I just have to look up. And then I believe this is a post request. So the endpoint here is going to be player/next. That is going to skip the song. You can see these are pretty straightforward. And then we're just going to put true here. We also, I guess we could just say post underscore equals true because this is a post request. So we do need to use the post method from inside this function. Awesome. So now that we have that, let's give that a save. And that's actually all we need to do to skip the song. So now let's hook up this endpoint here. So let's create a URL for it. So let's go path. And then inside of here, we're going to say skip, or we could say fast forward or whatever. I think skip just makes sense. And then we'll say skip song.as_view like that. And yeah, this of course is in the urls.py file inside of the Spotify folder. Awesome. So now that we have that set up, let's go to our musicplayer.js file. And inside of here, we're going to add, I guess, like a method that can actually send this request. So we're just going to take a quick pause to thank the sponsor of this video and this series, which is Algo Expert. Algo Expert is the best platform to use when preparing for your software engineering coding interviews and has helped thousands of people land jobs at large tech companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, so on and so forth. Get started using Algo Expert today by hitting the link in the description and using the discount code TechWithTim for a discount on the platform. So just like we've done here with play song and pause song, let's add another method and let's call this method skip song. Inside of here, all we're going to do is make our request options. So const request options is equal to, and then we'll start by defining the method. So the method of our request here is going to be a post request. Then we want the headers to be our typical. So we're going to say headers, and this is going to be content-type. And then application/JSON. Awesome. And then after that, what we will do is we will simply fetch the endpoint. So /Spotify/skip, and then we will pass our request options. So that's actually all we need to do to skip the song. Let's just add the, sorry, when I'm saying skip the song, this is the request we need to send to skip the song. Now let's go and actually hook this up so that when we press the skip button, it actually runs this. So icon button, just like we did here, we're going to say on click, and this is going to be equal to, and we're actually going to put an arrow function inside of here. I'll discuss why we're doing this in a second, but simply an arrow function that calls this dot skip song. And we actually are adding the brackets at the end of this because it's inside of the arrow function. So the reason we're going to use the arrow function, as many of you have pointed out in the comment section, is because this means we don't have to bind this method to this keyword. So if we didn't use the arrow function here, then what we would have to do if we just put onClick equal to this.skipSong without the parentheses, we would actually have to go up here and we would have to bind it inside of the constructor, as we've seen many times, because it's not going to have access to this keyword. Although now that I'm thinking about it, it doesn't really matter because this doesn't even use the this keyword. So I guess irrelevant, you can ignore that. But the moral of the story is that if you use an arrow function, any function that you call will automatically have access to the this keyword. So that's just something to keep in mind. All right, so now that we've finished that, let's test this out. So I'm just going to save. And now I'm going to do a quick refresh here. Now notice that we're getting this blank kind of template, right? Now this will happen in the situation where there's no song playing or we don't get any information back from Spotify. And in fact, let's look at our console. You can see we're getting all kinds of errors here because we're not getting any information. But if I actually just play the song and then pause the song on my Spotify, it shows up here. So just keep that in mind. That will happen sometimes, and you probably want to handle the case where it's empty and just fill in some, blank text. I think I discussed that previously. Anyways, now that we have this, let's press the skip button and let's see if this actually works. So it doesn't look like it's working. I think I might just need to refresh my cache here. And there we go. Let's try the skip button. And there it goes. Okay, so it is indeed working. So I just need to refresh the page. But now when I press the skip button, if I am the host, you can see that it does skip the song. Now let's just do a quick test here. I'm going to open up an incognito window and I'm going to join this room. And I'm just going to try to skip the song and see if this works if I'm not the host. So let's try this here. We should give it a second. Okay, and let's press skip. And we should notice that nothing is happening. Same thing here with pause and with play. It's just not happening, right? Well, sorry, pause and play is happening, I guess, because we have permission. But let's go and change the permission so that we have no control for our guests. So the guest can't actually play it. Okay, so it says it was updated. Awesome. Now let me try to play. We should see that it actually doesn't do anything, right? It's not working at all. So that's not working, and the skip button's not working. But of course, over here, I can pause and I can play it because I am the host. Awesome. So that was just kind of what I wanted to test there. Let me close this incognito window. And now let's set up the voting system. So let's go back to views.py. So we have kind of two cases here, right? The first case is the case in which we are the host. And if that's the case, we just go ahead and skip the song. But if we are not the host, then what we need to do is actually register a vote. So what I want to do now is I want to create a model. This is just going to be a model called vote, and this is going to allow us to store user votes. So let's go into models.py from our Spotify folder, and right underneath our Spotify token, let's create a new model called vote. This is going to inherit from models.model, and then I'll start going through the fields that we need. So before I do this, let's just quickly think about what a vote really is and what issues we could run into here. I've kind of briefly discussed them at the beginning of the video. So when a user votes, they're voting to skip the current song. So this kind of can be a little bit difficult, right? Because if, say, someone votes or 2 or 3 people vote, but the song doesn't get skipped because we didn't reach the number of votes required, and then all of a sudden, the song plays all the way through and a new song comes on. We need to make sure that every time a new song comes on, we clear all of the current votes because those votes were for the previous song, not the new one that just came on, right? The one that just started. So that's kind of the issue that we're going to run into here. And what that means is that we need to store, first of all, who voted, what song they voted for, what room they were in when they voted, and then we ideally should store what time they voted at in case we want to do any more like other checks with that. But that's kind of why I'm going to put these fields in here, because we need to know the person that voted. We need to know what room they were in when they voted, because obviously this vote is only registered for a specific room. And then, of course, we need to know what song they voted for. And then what we'll do is we'll clear all of the votes, so delete all of them from the database when a new song is played. And that way we always know that we have the most up-to-date votes that are for the current song. So let's go ahead and do this. The first thing I'm going to do is say user, and I can actually just copy, these first 2 fields I'm just going to copy from Spotify token because they're going to be the same. So we'll say user equals models.char field. This again will store that session key or the session ID, whatever you'd like to call it. Created at, straightforward, that will just store the date that we created this model at. And next I'm going to store the song ID. So we're going to say models.char field, max length is equal to 50. The IDs I think are like 20 characters long or something like that. And we don't need anything else there. That's fine. And then the last thing that we'll do is we'll actually use a room, or we'll store a room. So I'm going to say room is equal to models dot, and we're actually going to use something that I don't think we've used yet, which is a foreign key. So what I'm going to do is say room equals models.foreign key. I'm going to pass in room, and I'm just going to import this quickly. So from API.room, import room. And then we also need to pass one more argument, and I'm just going to type it all out, then I'll continue to explain. I'm going to say on delete equals models.cascade. So I'm just going to take a minute here and explain the foreign key. So as I said, when we have a foreign key, that just means we need to pass an instance of another object, in this case, a room object, to this vote model. So any room that we have stored in our database, we could pass one of those when we create a new vote. And what that will do is store a reference to that room in our vote. So that way, whenever we look at a vote, we can determine what room it was in, which is what we want. And then we can actually access all of the information about a room from this vote. Now, this is better than, say, storing the actual room code here, which is just would be a string, right? And then taking the code out and then querying the entire room table and then pulling out the correct room. This is just better, it's faster, and this is the preferred way to do it. It also allows us to do some other interesting queries that are just faster and more efficient. Now, what is this on delete? So this on delete pretty much says if this room gets deleted, the one that we passed in here, what should we do? Now, there's different options here, but models.cascade is the most popular. And what this means is just cascade down and delete anything that was referencing this room. So in this situation, it's pretty much saying any vote that was referencing this room or had a foreign key equal to a specific room that was deleted, we'll just delete all of those votes. So all votes associated with the room, they'll get deleted if the room gets deleted. That's what this is saying. Anyways, that's all we need for the vote table. Now, there is one more thing that we need to do, because remember, we need to keep track of the current song that is playing for a given room. So that way we know whether these votes based on the song ID are for the current song or if they're for an older song. So that means we need to actually go to our room model. So let's go to models.py inside of API. We need to add one field here. This is going to be called current_song. Now this is just going to be equal to models, .char field, and we're going to say that the max_length is equal to 50. That's all we need. And we need to spell models correctly just to store the currently playing song. And I'll show you how we update that and work with that in a second. Anyways, let's stop our Python server for a second because we're going to be having some errors here. And let's go ahead and run, the Python manage.py migrate. So actually, before I do what I was going to do, I realized that we have an error here. It says no module named api.room. Again, you guys probably caught this, but let's go back into our Spotify models.py. And we actually want to say from api.models, not api.room, import room. So I don't know why I messed that up, but either way, api.models, import room. Now that I saved that, that should be good. Now, since we've made a change to our models, what we need to do is run a migration. So we're going to say Python manage.py, and we're going to say make migrations like that. Django will just use its kind of fancy backend and database system to make these migrations properly. So let's go ahead and run that. And what does it say here? We're trying to add a non-nullable field current song to a room without a default. We can't do that. Okay, so it's actually a good option to run into, or a good error to run into. So essentially it's saying, hey, you added a field that is not able to be null, so it has to have some value in it, but we already have instances of rooms in our database, so what should we do with those? Well, we don't know, so that's why we're getting this error. So pretty much to solve this, I'm just going to press 2 to quit, and I'm going to go back to this model, and I'm going to make it so that it can actually have null there. So I just said 2, so quit, and let me add a default in models.py. So let's go to models.py. We could add a default, or we can just say null is equal to true. So let's go null equals true. And now let's try to run our migration. So Python manage.py make migrations. Notice that now we're all good. It says what it did. And the last step after we've made the migrations is to apply them. So Python manage.py and then migrate like that. Now this will just go through the existing database and make any changes to it that is required. Awesome. So now that we have that, we can run our server again. So Python manage.py run server. Looks like everything is working. And now we'll start actually dealing with this, this model. So what I want to do is, first of all, I want to keep track of the current song that's playing inside of my room. This is kind of the first step. So let's go back to views.py and let's go to get current song. So what I want to do inside of here is every time there is a request sent to current song or get current song or whatever it is, I want to update the room with the currently playing song ID. Now, this is actually pretty easy to do. We already have access to the room and we have access to the song ID. So all I really need to do is just update the room and just say currently playing song or current song is equal to song ID. So let's write another method inside of this class right here. I'm just going to call this define update underscore room underscore song. Now, what we'll do inside of here is we will simply take self, we will take the room object that we want to update, and we'll take the current song ID. That's all the information that we need. Inside of here, we're going to say current underscore song. So the song that's actually currently playing is equal to room dot current underscore song. Now this could be equal to none. That's totally fine, but I'm just going to check before I actually perform any update, which is a database intensive operation, does take some time to make sure that we're not just going to be updating the same thing. So I'm going to say if current song does not equal, song underscore ID. So that's the song that we just got that is playing right here. If these two things are not the same, that means that the song changed and we need to update it in our room. So then what we'll do is we'll say room.current_song is equal to song ID. And then we'll simply say room.save. And we've seen how to do this previously. We'll say update underscore fields is equal to and simply current underscore song like that. Now there's another step and we'll do this in 1 second. But pretty much this just tells us, hey, the song changed. Let's update the song and let's save the room with that new updated current song. Now, after we do this though, after we update the song, this means that any votes that we had in this room are automatically invalid, right? Because they would have been voting for a previous song. So even if, say, we skipped the song and that's the reason why this is happening, still we need to remove all of the other votes. So what we can say is votes is equal to vote, and we'll import this in 1 second, dot objects dot filter, and we'll filter for all of the objects where the room is equal to the room. So now you can see why it's important to have the foreign key here, because with an instance of a room, which this is, right, we'll call this function and pass in this room right here, we're able to actually query the vote object and find, well, any of the vote objects that are voting for this room. So once we do that, all we'll do is simply say delete like that, and this will delete all of the vote objects that have a room equal to whatever room we pass in here. And that's it. That's all we need to do to actually update and remove all of these votes. So now let's go to the top of the program and let's import vote. So from API.models, that's actually not the one we want. We're going to say from .models like that, import room. And sorry, not room, import vote. That's what we want. And now we should actually be good, and all of that should be working. Awesome. So now let's just call update room song. We can just do this at the very bottom before we return our response. So we'll say self.update room song, because this is a method defined in this class. And then we'll pass in the room, and we'll pass in the song ID. And I guess that's all we need, and that should hopefully be working for us. Awesome. So now that we have that, let's go back to our skip song view here. And let's make it so that if someone is voting and they are not the host of a room, we actually create a new vote for them. And then, yeah, like add that to the room, right? So the first thing that we can do is we can actually get all of the votes for this current song so far. So we're going to say votes is equal to vote.objects.filter. We're going to filter the room equal to room. And I guess we'll just take, no, we don't need index 0, that's fine. We'll say room equals to room, and sorry, one other thing as well, song underscore ID is equal to room.current song. Now the reason it's important to do this, why we're adding an extra parameter to this query here, is because we want to make sure that we're not grabbing any votes that are older. So for some reason, let's say, it didn't delete the older votes in the database. We just want to make sure we're not grabbing any votes that aren't voting for the currently playing song. Now there is potentially issues with this if, say, you skip a song and then the next song that comes on is the exact same song. It will have the same song ID. Either way, that's fine. I mean, that's like an edge case. And if you skipped the current song, you would ideally just skip the next song, right? Because, well, if you skip the current song, you probably want to skip the next song if it's the exact same. Hopefully that makes sense, but now we have all of the votes. Now the next thing I'm going to do is just say votes underscore needed is equal to room.votes underscore to underscore skip. So this is important because I need to understand how many votes we actually need before we skip the song. And then that allows me to actually add one thing to this if statement here, which is the following. Or votes underscore needed. And sorry, I'm doing this in the wrong order. That's going to go after. That's why I was confusing myself. I'm going to say, sorry, the len of votes plus 1 is greater than or equal to votes needed. So just to explain this quickly, when we call this post request, this is someone requesting to skip the current song. So if we check the amount of votes we currently have, because we haven't added a vote for this person yet, and that number plus 1, so including this person's current vote, is greater than or equal to the number of votes we need to skip the current song, we should skip the current song. So that's what this logic is doing right here, is checking how many votes we had and saying, okay, if that plus 1, so including our current vote, is greater than how many we need, let's skip the song. Now, if this is not the case, what we need to do instead is create a new vote. So we're going to say vote is equal to, if I can add the equal sign here, is equal to vote. And we're going to say user is equal to self.request.session underscore key. We're going to say room is equal to room. We've already got access to that. And we're going to say song ID is equal to, and we need to get the song ID, which is room.current song. So room.current song like that. Awesome. So now that we have that, what we need to do is save the vote. So we're going to say vote.save, and that should actually create a new vote in the database for us. Now, one last thing we need to add to this function that logically makes sense. If we skip the song, we should automatically clear all of the votes that we just had. This is just to avoid any potential issues if, say, for some reason we're not calling this this get current song API view, which is handling updating the current song and clearing all the votes and all of that. So just inside of here, before we actually skip the song, let's clear all of the votes. So to do that, we're just going to say votes.delete. The reason we can do this is because this list here stores all of the votes that meet this query. So we'll just delete all of them after we skip the current song. Awesome. or sorry, before we skip the current song, we'll delete all of them, then we'll skip the current song, and anyways, you get the idea. So that should now work. But what I want to do now is I want to make it so that our front end actually knows how many votes we currently have skipped. Because at this point in time, this will actually work. If I pop up a bunch of incognito windows or I make like the number of votes to 1, you'll see that this does work. We actually can skip the song. But there's no way for us to know how many currently skipped songs we have, right? Or how many skips we have on the current song. So let's actually make sure that the front end has that information and displays it properly. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the this right here, current song, so this API view, and notice that I added this thing called votes inside of my song request, right? So when I actually sent back all the information, right now we're just sending back votes equal to 0. But now, this is why I've done this, we're going to actually send back the number of votes for the current song in this room. So we're going to do a very similar thing to what we just did inside of skip song. In fact, I'm just going to copy votes is equal to this query right here. So let's copy that. Let's go up here right before song. And what we're going to do now is say votes is equal to vote.objects.filter, room is equal to room, song ID is equal to, and instead of room.current_song, we're just going to say song_ID. Now what we can do is we can simply put the len around this. So we'll just say len like that, and we can replace the 0 here with votes. And now what we'll do is we'll return the number of votes for the current song. So that's awesome. That's pretty much all we needed to do. And you know what? This is going to be a little bit strange because we're already getting this information. You'll see why we do this in 1 second, or at least I'll explain it. I'm going to add one more thing in this information that we want to return. And this is going to be votes required. So like votes required to skip or votes needed to skip. And what I'm going to do here is just put room.votes_to_skip. Now, again, you'll see why we're doing this in 1 second. And we're just saying room is undefined. We should have access to room. No, room's up here. Undefined variable room. Maybe my IDE is just bugging here. I think this should be working. Let me check my output. And yeah, let's save. Okay, yeah, everything's still working, so I don't know why it's giving me these squiggly lines. Anyways, we're gonna say room.votes to skip, and this way we'll constantly be checking and constantly getting new information about whether or not we've updated the number of votes to skip. So let's now go to the front end so we can actually see some of this working. Let's go to musicplayer.js, and inside of here, what we're gonna do is just right beside the skip button, we're gonna put a little bit of code here. Now, remember that we're passing all of the information, and I have to go back here now, from this, right? So we call this request, and then we pretty much pass all of this information through to our music player. So now we have access to votes as well as votes required. So we can use both of these keys from the props of our musicplayer.js to display how many votes have been cast for the current song. So what we're going to say is this .props.votes like that. Then we're just going to put a slash, and notice that's not inside of the squiggly brackets like this. And then we're going to say this .props.votes_required like that. Now, ideally, what this should do is show right beside the skip icon the number of votes that we currently have, then just a real slash, like we're not doing a division or anything here, and then it will show us the number of votes required. So we'll say like, 1 out of 2 or 3 out of 2 or something like that. And actually, this space is a good idea. It just auto-added that for me. That's interesting. So that they're not like smushed together. Anyways, let's refresh the page now. I'm going to do an empty cache and hard reload. You can see the slash is here with no information. Now let me just play and pause a song. And there we go. Now we have 0 out of 3. Now, you can argue whether or not you like how this looks. You could also just put a number beside here that says something like 1 or 2 or 3, but then you wouldn't know how many votes were required. Either way, let's just make this look a little bit nicer. I think it will look nicer if it comes before the skip icon. So let's do that. I'm just going to take the skip icon and place it after this. And let's have a look now. Okay, there we go. So a little bit better. I mean, again, you guys can be the judge. You can make this text smaller if you want to, but I'm just going to leave it like this because I think this is fine. So now to actually test this, because we're currently the host, so if we decide to skip, then it's just going to actually skip the song. It's not going to increment the counter by 1. So let's go to an incognito window, and let me just copy this code here, and let's join this room. So 127, join a room. Let's press enter, give it a second to load, and now let's vote. When we vote, we see that we get 1 popping up here on the screen. So that's awesome. That's what we wanted to see. And if we look over here, we're getting 1. Now, the reason why I wanted to send through the votes required, even though we're already grabbing that information from the front end, is because of this. When I go to settings and I change the votes, let's say update room to 2, you should see on the other screen that it automatically updates to 2. If we didn't pass this information through, this would not automatically update, and we would have to refresh the browser for that to occur. So now let's see what happens if I actually change this to 1. I have not tested this case. I want to see if it just automatically skips the song. It may not. So is it skipping the song? No, it's not going to skip the song. And the reason it's not going to skip the song when we have 1 out of 1 and the user had already voted is because we only check to skip the current song in the situation where we send that skip request. So now if I don't know, let's just press skip. It should just skip the song. Yeah, so it does actually skip the song, and now we have 0 to 1. And if our guest decides to skip, well, every single time it will just automatically skip the song because you only need 1 skip. So that is all I wanted to show you, and that really is going to wrap up this video. So if you do want to test this application, you can do it in an incognito window, but I will quickly show you how you can run it on your local area network and use, say, your phone as another device to test this, because it's cool to do it like from your phone as well as the web browser and see everything updating in live time. So if you do want to run this on your local area network, meaning any device on your Wi-Fi network can connect to this, what you can do is when you say python manage.py run server, you can say 0.0.0.0 colon 8000, just deciding the port that you want to run this off of. You could run it on a different port if you wanted to. And anyways, if you run it like this, you will see that it does work, but when you try to connect to this, and I'll show you how you connect to it and kind of how this works, you're going to get an error. So what you need to do after you run your server like this is you need to go into settings.py inside of your, let's find it here, main application, settings.py. You need to go to allowed hosts, which is right here, and you need to add 0.0.0.0 like that inside of allowed hosts. The reason you have to do this is because you're pretty much saying, hey, you are now allowed to run outside of, what would you call it? Local host. You're now allowed to run on the actual network. And this is just a required thing that you need to tell Django. Anyways, once you do this, to connect to this from a device that is not the current device you're running the server on, so rather than going to 127.0.0.1, whatever, you need to find the IP address of this device. There's many ways to do this. I'm not going to show you. I imagine you guys can do that or you can look it up. So the local IP address of this device that's running the web server, and then you need to go to that IP address, colon 8000, because that's the port, and this should work for you. Now, if this doesn't work for you, what you can do is add your local IP address into allowed hosts here. And I forget if you need to add the port as well, but you can try those different combinations. And once you do this, this should work. So just keep that in mind. That's how you run this on your local area network. And I will do another video after this, kind of going through a lot of stuff and showing you, first of all, like the hooks and the new React components, the functional components and all of that. But that is pretty much the core functionality of this application. So anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know what else you want to see from Tech with Tim.